Manchester, and welcome to another edition of Girard at Large. I am your post-election host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. As you know, you can still find us online at girardatlarge.com, and you can find us on Facebook, but not Twitter, because we won't go where the Taliban is allowed to tweet, but a former president isn't, at Girard at Large. And in terms of other social media, well, we're eagerly awaiting the launch of the new social media platform that former President Donald Trump has announced he is in the process of assembling. And it promises to be a free speech, no censorship, no algorithm, no messing with your stuff, no shadow banning type of platform. But until then, I've opened up a new platform at gab.com, which I have to tell you, while I like the setup and whatnot at Gab, I find it very frustrating to try to find people that I know there, and I haven't quite figured that out yet. And we are going to start moving our stuff from YouTube to Rumble. So who knows? Maybe we'll even co-stream this live on Rumble, because I'm not sure what we're going to do about Facebook. But the more I'm involved with Facebook, the more I just don't like it. And of course, the recriminations from this past election have taken their expression there on social media, among other places. And of course, well, we're going to go over it all today. I'm not exactly sure where to start, except first what I'd like to say, as someone who has had his name occasionally on a ballot, whether I agree with those candidates or not, who did put those people who did put their name on a ballot. I want to congratulate everybody who did for expending the effort and stepping forward. I think one of the problems that we have here in the city of Manchester, and I don't think it's unique to the city of Manchester, is it seems to be that fewer and fewer people are stepping forward to take the plunge into public office, and I find that to be problematic. Here in the city of Manchester, non-partisan elections, in my opinion, have had a disastrous effect on the city and its electoral process. And it's not unique to Manchester. It's something that you can pretty much trace to any community that moves from partisan to non-partisan elections. You do see certain things happen. One of the things you see is a decrease in the number of candidates who come forward to run for office. What ends up happening in non-partisan systems is that the predominant party, the party that has the most members, which in cities tend to be Democrats, they tend to ultimately dominate the political landscape. And we've seen that here in Manchester, effectively with one-party rule, and one-party rule, regardless of what party it is never a good thing. And the other thing you see, well, let me back up. And this is something I actually studied in school, and we've seen it in practice here in Manchester. And that is, nonpartisan elections dramatically increase the power of incumbency and strengthen an incumbent's ability to stay in office. And this happens for a number of reasons. Not the least of which is, in removing party affiliation from the ballot, you remove a key piece of information from voters who maybe aren't paying as much attention as everybody would like. But whether you think it's right or wrong, or whether you like it or not, being able to identify on a ballot somebody's party is a very key piece of voter information that, in my opinion, should be provided. And number two, even though the parties certainly continue to campaign for the members of their party in nonpartisan systems, it makes it mushy, it makes it blurry, and it makes it makes clear party identification very difficult. Now, in a partisan system, the way it used to work is the parties actually had roles to play. So if you get past the filing period for office and there were still vacancies, whether it was for selectman, ward clerk, moderator, school board, or alderman, the parties got to step in and appoint somebody to fill the vacancy. So you wouldn't see uncontested races. You wouldn't see nobody without any opposition. And whether you think opposition in a political or competition in a political race is good or bad. The fact of the matter is the more people you have on the ballot, the more likely it is you're going to bring more people to the polls. So nonpartisan elections, and not just in Manchester, but wherever they've been implemented, have strengthened incumbency because they have deterred people from running for office, and fallout and turnout falls. And we've seen that here in Manchester. I did a study not that long ago. I want to say it was probably 6 years ago. I went back through all of the races that have happened in the city of Manchester since going nonpartisan. And if I remember correctly, there were 240 races, right? Mayor, welfare commissioner, the at-large, the school board, and the alderman, right? So basically 30 races a year, 8 election cycles. And out of 240 races, can you guess how many people, how many incumbents were defeated? Out of 240 races, can you guess? Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, the number was 7. And most of those had been mayors. Mayor was Oric, Mayor Baines. Ginta wasn't defeated, but Brad Cook, school board at large, was defeated. So very few people have lost, very few incumbents have lost their seats since we've gone nonpartisan. And with what happened in Tuesday's election, one-party rule has pretty much been solidified here in the city of Manchester. I think Levasseur, Sharonov, and Sapienza, that would be Ed Sapienza of Ward 8, are the only Republicans on the board of aldermen. And I think Gonzalez is the only Republican on the board of school committee. So at this point, regardless of what you think of the turnout or the outcome, Joyce Craig now entirely owns the political operation of the city of Manchester. There is no functional opposition to the agenda that she has put forward. So she owns it all now, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. So let's first go through the races that took place. We're going to talk in detail about the mayor's race. Some real close races in the aldermanic and school board contests. Kathleen Kelly Arnold of Ward 2 losing 907 to 881 to Sean Parr, who is frankly a left-wing ideologue. Kathleen Kelly Arnold, and I'm just going to say this, I would ask for the recount. So we get 26 vote difference between the two. And I don't know if this happened in all of the wards, but when I went to vote in Ward 2, because that's where I live, when I was handed my ballot, I was told to make sure not to fold the ballot, even though the ballot had been pre-creased to have been folded, which I thought was odd. And again, even though my recount showed that Manchester's voting machines didn't have what we'll call the Wyndham problem, now that I know, at least in Ward 2, there were ballots handed out that had creases in them, a 26 vote margin is certainly a recountable margin. And because I still think there's some residual hesitancy or some doubt about the machines, if I were Kathleen Kelly Arnold in Ward 2, I would be asking for the recount. Jim Roy, to me, this was a bit of a shocker, losing by 49 votes, 540 to 589 to Fajardo, I think is how you say her name. Joyce Craig went after Jim Roy, and it looks like she got him. I don't know that 49 votes on that kind of a margin is one that would justify a recount, and I doubt. I haven't spoken to Jim, but I doubt that he would actually call for the recount. Manchester has lost a terrific alderman whose expertise went beyond just being an alderman. He served on the planning board. He served on the zoning board. He had a really good understanding of the development needs of the city, the neighborhood needs, and he did a great job balancing it. He, all in all, in my 30 some odd years now, having been involved in Manchester city government, Jim Roy is a standout as an alderman, and that's just a tragic loss. And then Ross Terrio loses by 672 to 663 to Mary Heath, sister of former Democrat State Party Chair Kathleen Sullivan. That's what, 7-9 votes? Ross, that's definitely a recountable margin. And you should go for it. I remember talking to Ross about that, saying, you gotta be careful. You gotta make sure. And I'm not saying he didn't do the work, but at the end of the day, 9 votes. And if there are a lot of you out there who don't think your vote counts, but every election cycle, I think Tim Baines, for example, beat Pat Long by, it was either 3 or 6 votes. In every election cycle, there is always an outcome that makes it known that every vote counts. Now, so around the city, there were a lot of elections that were close enough that people who stayed home and would have otherwise voted for the person who lost should give themselves a good swift kick in the butt. Couple interesting facts. Wards 1, 2, 6, and 8 accounted for 9,315 of the 19,540 ballots cast in this election. That's 47.6% of the turnout in the city of Manchester came from wards 1, 2, 6, and 8. 2 are Democrat wards, 2 are Republican wards. But what they have in common, wards 1, 2, 6, and 8, are that they are largely single-family neighborhoods. Now, Ward 2, especially like in the neighborhood that I live in, and I'll say that neighborhood runs roughly from Bridge Street on the south to Webster Street on the north, Union Street on the west, and Mammoth Road to the east. There's a lot of, we'll call it mixed housing there. For example, I live in a 2-family, and in my neighborhood, it's predominantly 2-family. There are some single families. There are some triple deckers, but that is sort of like the anomaly neighborhood in these 4 wards, 1, 2, 6, and 7, 6 and 8. But predominantly the wards with the highest turnout routinely are the wards with the heaviest single family neighborhoods. And we've talked about this, folks. It's another reason why we should avoid building high-density rental housing. Those people might turn out in presidential elections, but they don't turn out in local elections. And the reason why they don't turn out in local elections is they are not invested, meaning they really don't care about the local community because they're transients. They are here for a brief period of time. They are not here to put down roots, raise their family, retire comfortably, or anything else like that. And so, people pick on, somebody posted, on election night, I was putting the results up on my Girard at Large Facebook page, and someone posted, criticizing the candidates for not going to, the Ward 5s and the Ward 11s and the Ward 4s and the places, that had lower voter turnout, saying that he didn't care about that. The candidates didn't care about people in poverty. They just went to the wealthier neighborhoods to campaign. No, what you tend to do is go to the neighborhoods that have a high percentage of voters, and those neighborhoods are invariably single-family neighborhoods, and that includes, neighborhoods like mine. I mean, Ward 2, as Ward 2 has expanded and grown, right? The north of Wellington Road, Courier Hill, and all that stuff to the north, those single, that added to Ward 2. But Ward 2 used to be the second highest turnout ward in the city. And as of this election, it was number 4, behind wards 1, 6, and 8. And what does 6 and 8 have in common? They've had a lot of single family, especially 6, development in recent years. But if you want more voters, then you need to have more people who are invested in what happens in the local community. And you get that when you build, say it with me, single family housing, which this city is not done. 3 out of every 4 housing units built in the last decade in Manchester have been apartments, and most of those have been low income. And, if we follow the new master plan, which recommends the elimination of single family zoning, and if not politically possible, then the severe downsizing of single family zones to make them more dense. In other words, instead of having a 100 by 100 lot or a 75 by 100 square foot lot, jam them into a 50. Make sure that they're on top of each other so it is less desirable to all of the people who are middle and upper income folks who move to our suburbs for the types of housing and neighborhoods that they would like, because the city of Manchester refuses to provide it for them. So, but I digress. So taking a look at the at-large race, I got a phone call from a member of our large and loyal listening audience asking me for my analysis of the alderman at-large race, where Joe Kelly Levasseur clung to his aldermanic seat, taking a rather distant second, some 244, 17, 3, almost 500 votes behind June Trisciani, a newcomer to the ballot here in Manchester, who raised and spent $50,000. Now, truth be told, the last person to raise and spend that much money on an alderman at large race that I know of was me back in 1997, where, if my memory serves me correctly, I raised and spent $40,000 on my campaign for alderman at large back in the day. But Trisciani clearly had the backing of the mayor. She had the backing of every major labor union. The Democrats in this city, got to give the devils their due. They do a really good job getting to their voters, getting their voters out to the polls, and making sure they not only vote for the top of the ticket, but they drive it deep down ballot. And that's something the Manchester Republican Committee has failed to do for many years now, as it has been incapable of getting its act together to either recruit candidates and raise the money necessary to support them, or otherwise provide them with the technical assistance that newcomers to the political process need to have. So the Democrats really boosted, June Trisciani. They paid lip service to Danny O'Neill, but it's no secret that Joyce Craig wanted Danny out. He wasn't necessarily her lapdog. And don't expect Trisciani to part ways with Mayor Craig on anything. That much is for sure. And many folks were surprised about Dan Goonan not making it. I think a lot of people thought that it would be Levasseur and Goonan, or maybe Goonan and Trisciani. But a couple things to take a look at here in this race. And it's a pattern that's evolved, and it's a pattern that I was prepared to play had I survived the primary. But, where Levasseur carried the day were the wards that Republicans have to win in order to win citywide races, right? So Trisciani, stomped him in Ward 1, 2, 3, and 4, although Ward 4 wasn't really a stomping. That was fairly close. And Ward 5, which was also fairly close. And Ward 7, which was also really close. So the way it has to, the way it typically works is, but the way it typically works is, if you're a Republican and you're running citywide, you're going to lose Ward 1, you're going to lose Ward 2, and you're going to lose Ward 3. You're probably going to lose wards 4, 5, and 7, But, you know, those are more swing type wards. And so you have to keep it close in those wards. And then you have to run up your margins in wards 6, 8, 9, and 10, 11, 12 on the west side. So basically the east side, the south end, and the west side are where Republicans have got to get their votes. And that's exactly what Levasseur did, carrying wards 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Now, there were 7,633 blank votes, undervotes, overvotes, blank ballots in that race. Now, one of the things Levasseur did was make a push, a big push, and I told you folks on this show last week, if you want Joe Levasseur back, give him your bullet. Don't vote for anybody else. Give him your bullet vote. And, I have to say hi to my little kids. Hi, Emmerich. Hi, Amelie. Hope you're enjoying the popcorn. And with 7,633 now, did all of those go to Levasseur? Probably not, because there were 7,874 votes that Levasseur got. But I would think a substantial number of that 7,633 did go to Joe. And it looks like it worked because he beat Goonan by less than 100 votes. There are some Goonan folks who are upset with me for the article that I published last week and told you about last week about the sexual harassment complaint that's been filed with the New Hampshire Human Rights Division. I forget, I'm drawing a blank on the name. But listen, folks, I didn't, that story found me. I didn't go looking for it. And shame on the rest of the media, frankly, for not picking it up, because there's a legitimate question about that there. So did that play a role in whether or not Goonan lost? Who knows? I can only tell you that, let's just say it got a fair amount of traffic on the Girard at Large website. So I guess I'm not pro-public schools. Well, you can still go to Girard for Mayor and you can see what I actually proposed to rescue our schools. And frankly, with the proficiency scores that we have here in the city of Manchester, which have been on the decline, the steady decline since at least 2013 when the district converted to Common Core, it gets harder and harder to make the case that people should send their kids to Manchester schools as they exist today, which is why some of us who recognize that the landscape in education has changed dramatically, and choice is already a part of that landscape, right? So with 1 out of every 4 eligible children, with 1 out of every 4 kids who could go to a Manchester public school already going somewhere else, whether it's a charter school, a Catholic school, a private school, an out-of-district public school, or being homeschooled. And that number is growing consistently, right? Remember, Jim O'Connell predicted that when school was back in session, the 1,200 kids, I think it was, give or take, who left the district specifically because of COVID would come flocking back. Yeah, they didn't come flocking back, and the numbers show that. So, you kind of have to recognize the problem to address it. And some of us had a pretty aggressive public school choice program that would have given parents the opportunity to make choices, given educators the opportunity to create options, and invited the community, using the laws that we already have on the books here in the state of New Hampshire, to step up and provide other public school options that, would probably bode well for our public school system. So GirardForMayor.com, it's still up if you want to go check that out. All right, so ultimately Levasseur did what he needed to do, and he got the turnout that he needed to get. in wards 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. He kept it close in 4, 5, and 7, and he needed to because, like just about every other Republican, he got shelled in wards 1, 2, and 3. Now, folks, there has been some belly aching over the fact that, wards 1 and 2 are delivering substantial margins for Democrats in citywide races. But to be perfectly truthful with you, Republicans have been complaining about that for some time now. And what Republicans need to do is get their act together, reestablish the ward committees that used to exist here in the city of Manchester Republican Party system, and start meeting their neighbors. Years ago, there was a fellow named Mike Pelletier who was the chairman of the Ward 6 Republican Committee. And one of the reasons I'm convinced why Ward 6 is a Republican ward today is because Mike Pelletier literally, by himself, went door to door, knocking on the doors of every Republican he could find in Ward 6 to let them know that there was a Ward 6 Republican committee to get them involved, bring them into the volunteer pool, get some of them to run for office. That's the kind of work that needs to be done. And it's not easy to do because, most Republicans have got day jobs. They don't have party benefactors that, like the Democrats do, that just pump, oodles of cash into their organizations so you can pay people to do the work that Republicans need volunteers to do. But wards 1 and wards 2 and ward 3, which, doesn't have big numbers, but it delivers big percentages to Democrats. A little elbow grease, a little organization, and a little determination to find people who are there would go a long way to making inroads in those wards. And meanwhile, though, the Republicans tend to take for granted the areas where they do have some advantage, like in Ward 6 and Wards 8. That just is what it is. All right, on to the mayor's race. So I told you a week or two ago, I forget which, I did some numbers, and I predicted, I said for Victoria Sullivan to win, she is going to need a turnout of roughly 23,000 people. And I did that based on I'll call it a statistical analysis of the data. And I said, if we get to 23,000, she needs 65% of the independent vote in order to pull this off. And I was going back and doing some numbers today to prep for the show. And I think the 2015 and 2017 elections actually sort of bear out that statistical analysis. Because in 2015, where Mayor Ted Gatsas, by his fingernails, held on to office, there were 20,198 votes cast in that election. Gatsas got 10,046. Craig got 9,961. That was 2015. Now, 2017, fast forward, there were 22,830 voters that cast ballots. Ted Gatsas actually boosted his vote count by over 5%. He got 10,570 votes. The problem is Joyce Craig boosted her vote total by about 20%, getting 12,068 votes for a roughly 1,500 vote difference between the two. And in order to pick up those extra votes, she had to get people who don't normally vote in city elections to the polls. And that's why you saw the bump from 20,198 to 22,000. You saw roughly a 10% increase in the overall voter turnout. And Victoria needed to see something like that here. But it didn't happen. And we're going to get into the numbers now, and we're going to go ward by ward, because there are some folks out there, including Victoria, who are blaming yours truly for the fact that she lost. The write-in effort, not with the write-in effort being the ire of their existence. And I'm going to restate why I suggested people write me in. Number one, there were a number of Democrats and independents who were going to vote for me in the general election. They voted for me in the primary. They were going to do the same in the general. They weren't going to vote for Victoria. They weren't. So the option was, hey, write me in, send a message, or let them go back and vote for Joyce. Because that's what most of them would have done. Some of them would have left it blank, but that's what most of them would have done. So that was certainly a consideration. And then there were people who were, diehard supporters of mine that were so offended by how she treated me in the primary that if they were going to come out and vote, they were going to leave the ballot blank. Well, I wanted to find a mechanism to get them to the polls because there were down ballot races, like the one in Ward 7, where their vote would have mattered. And where their vote wouldn't have mattered, it became a send a message kind of thing. And so that was the motivation. And I was under no illusion that I was going to get, thousands of votes or even hundreds of votes. I would have been, happy or surprised, I guess, if I had even gotten 100 votes. But when you've got tight elections, like in Ward 7, an extra 10 or 15 people turning out to vote, to send a message, could make all of the difference in the world in the down ballot races. So for the record, I got 81 votes. Here's the word by word tally. I got 81 votes. I got 13 write-ins from Ward 1, 13 in Ward 2. I got problems in Ward 3. I got none in Ward 3. I got a big goose egg in Ward 3. What did I ever do to you? I get 7 out of Ward 4, 5 out of 5, 2 out of 6, 4 out of 7, 5 out of 8, 5 out of 9, 12 out of 10, 5 out of 11, and 10 out of 12. For a total of 81. Okay. There were a grand total, by the way, of 130 write-ins. We're going to get to the word-by-word numbers now because in order to make the case that I somehow cost Victoria Sullivan the election, you'd have to see it in the numbers. And I'm just going to tell you right now, without knowing how many Democrats, Independents, or Republicans voted, we won't know that until the city clerk's office has scanned the checklist and to collect the demographic data on the turnout. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'll go out on the limb after we go through the word by word totals. So let's take a look. We're going to go word by word, and you're going to see it's very interesting what the numbers were and how they. Look at this. It's very interesting to see how the numbers turned ward by ward. Okay, let's, we ready, Kyle? Let's put up Ward 1. So here's Ward 1. This is a comparison, by the way, between 2019 and 2021. Joyce Craig in 2019 got 1,804 votes. In 2021, she got 1,749. She lost 55 votes. Victoria Sullivan got 1,036 in 2019, 1,100 in 2021, an increase of 64 votes. People who, the number of ballots that didn't register a vote, 24 in 19, 24 in 21. And the write-ins, well, there were 5 write-ins in 2019, 22, a quadrupling, oh my head, a quadrupling of the number in 2021 for an increase in 17. Overall, 2,869 people voted in Ward 1 in 2019, 2,895 in 2021 for a total increase in voter turnout in Ward 1 of 26 votes. So this ward provided Victoria with a net gain of 9 votes. You could have taken all of the no votes and all of the write-ins and added them to Victoria's number. It wouldn't have changed the outcome. Ward 2. All right, Craig, 1,268 to 1,209. She lost 59 votes. Sullivan, 789 to 847. She picked up 58 votes. The no votes went from 17 to 22, an increase of 5. The write-ins went from 6 to 18, a tripling. Total voter turnout in Ward 2 increased by 16 votes. Ward 3. Craig, 654 in 2019 to 620, a decrease of 34 votes. And I'm going to share what I think these increases and decreases are when we get to the end, because I'm going to go out on a limb and tell you what I think happened, and I hope the numbers bear me out when they're available. And if they don't, well, they won't. So the number of blank ballots went from 11 to 9, and the number of write-ins went from 8 to 6. So in Ward 3, there was a net decrease of votes cast of 12. Okay? So in this ward, unlike Wards 1 and Wards 2, I mean, Ward 1, she got more votes. Victoria got more votes than Joyce lost. In Ward 2, they got almost the same number of votes, meaning Joyce lost 59, Victoria picked up 58. So basically, it's a wash there. Here, there is an 8-vote difference, right? So Joyce lost 34, but Victoria picked up 26, meaning she didn't even pick up all of the votes that Joyce lost, but 12 fewer votes cast in Ward 3 overall. Ward 4. Craig, 710 to 628. Wow, she took a tumble in Ward 4, 82-vote decrease. Sullivan, 504 to 568, a 64-vote jump, but not all 82. The blank ballots went from 5 to 7, and the write-ins, oh my head, they quintupled from 2 to 10. Overall, Ward 4 saw a decrease of 8 votes in 2021 versus 2019. Ward 5. Craig, 511 to 419. Wow, she just took a flat-out dump. 92 votes. That's roughly an 18% decrease in her vote count from Ward 5. And what Ward 5 is going to show, what Ward 5 really shows, Sullivan went down from 344 to 336, so she lost 8 votes versus 2019. The blank ballots went from 13 to 8, so there was a decrease there, but the write-ins went from 2 to 5, a near tripling, a gain of 3. Overall, a decrease of 102 votes. Now, Ward 5 is a Democratic ward, and what this is signaling is that there are some places where the Democrats just stayed home. Ward 6. Craig went from 1,075 in 2019 to 1,022 in 2021, a decrease of 53 votes for Joyce Craig. Now, Victoria Sullivan, remember, Ward 6 is generally speaking a Republican ward. Ward 6 gave Victoria a 122 vote boost over 2019, going from 975 to 1,097. The no votes, the blank ballots went from 21 to 19, and the write-ins went from 4 to 5. Overall, there was a 68 vote increase, increase in voters in Ward 6, 68 votes. I mean, it's statistically irrelevant, but there's a shift in the numbers here, which, let's just say that the added 68 all went to Victoria. What you're seeing here is independents changing from Joyce to Victoria, right? That's really what you're seeing here. But, Republican ward, stronger Republican numbers, stronger turnout. It would seem where some of the Democrat wards saw a fall off in turnout, the Republican wards saw, some Republican wards saw an uptick. Ward 7. Craig goes from 766 to 745, a decrease of 21 votes. Sullivan goes from 666, to 664, a decrease of 2. Blank ballots went down from 20 to 13, and write-ins went up from 4 to 8. A doubling of the write-ins. Oh, my head. A ballot-crushing event. All in all, 26 fewer votes cast in Ward 7. Everybody loses across the board on this one except me with my 5. What was it? I got Ward 4. Oh, this is Ward 7. With my 4 write-ins. That means there were 4 other people written in. Ward 8, big Republican ward. Joyce Craig falls mightily from 1,093 to 953 for a drop of 140 votes. That's a big, big shift. Sullivan goes from 1106 to 1210, a pickup of 104. So there were 36 more votes lost for Craig than picked up for Sullivan. The blank ballots went from 8 to 6, and the write-ins more than sextupled from 2 to 13. However, all in all, overall turnout in Ward 8 was down by 27 votes. So it's essentially a break even. But what you're seeing here, again, I believe, is a realignment of independents from Craig to Sullivan in Ward 8, a Republican ward. Ward 9. This is an interesting ward, kind of enlightening here. A Democrat ward, and what I consider to be sort of like the last bastion of the famous Manchester Democrats. They would be the ones, as I like to say, the ones who love the babies and hate the taxes, those conservative Manchester Democrats who are very strongly pro-labor, right? So Craig, she takes a header here. Her vote count goes down by almost 10%, 884 to 804. However, Sullivan only picked up 4 votes. She went from 808 to 812. So she narrowly lost this war. Well, she got hammered, actually, 2 years ago. She picked up 4 votes and she won it this time, not because she had an uptick in her vote count, but because Joyce Craig did not see, because Joyce Craig saw her votes tumble. The blank ballots went from 24 to 15, and the write-ins, boy, this one, up 10. Wow. 1 to 10, up 9. Overall, though, Ward 9, a Democrat stronghold, saw 76 fewer voters turn out. And again, my opinion is that those are Democrats who stayed home. Ward 10, Joyce Craig takes another tumble, more than 10%, 889 to 800. And Victoria saw a modest pickup from 717 to 745. So Joyce lost 89 votes, but Victoria only picked up 28 of them. The no votes, the blank ballots went from 16 to 11, so there was a decrease there. And the write-ins quintupled, went from 3 to 15, and 12 of those 15 were for me. Ward 10. Overall, 54 fewer voters in Ward 10 this time versus 2019. So what you're seeing here with a couple, with a couple wards not being the case, what you're seeing here is essentially the same turnout as you saw in 2019. Ward 11. Ward 11 saw Joyce Craig's voter numbers plunge seriously. She went from 546 to 460. Sullivan had a pretty sizable uptick from 477 to 551. Blank ballots went from 18 to 9, and the write-ins doubled from 4 to 8. But overall, 17 fewer ballots were cast in Ward 11 in 2021 versus 2019. And so, again, what you're probably seeing here are maybe Democrats who stayed home. And Ward 12. So Craig loses 13 votes, going from 851 in 2019 to 838 in 2020. Sullivan picks up 41 votes, going from 665 to 706. The blank ballots remained level at 13, and the write-ins went from 1 to 10, and all 10 of them were for me. I swept Ward 12. It was a unanimous vote. But Ward 12, one of the few wards to see an uptick in overall turnout at plus 37. So if we take a look at this at a citywide level, Craig falls from 11,051 votes to 10,247, a decrease of 804 votes. So she got 56% of the vote in 2019 and got 52.4% of the vote in 2021. Sullivan picked up 575 votes, going from 8441 to 9,016. So she went from 42.8% in 2019 to 46.1% in 2021. The number of blank ballots decreased from 190 in 2019 to 156. So it went from 0.96 to 0.78% of the vote. And the write-ins more than tripled, going from 0.21% of the vote to 0.66. 81 of those 130 write-in votes were for me. Overall turnout was down by 175 votes, which I believe were Democrats who didn't come out to vote, but we will know that when we see the turnout numbers. So overall turnout was down by 0.89%. So those are the numbers on this election. Clearly, my suggestion that people send a message did not affect the outcome of this election. The gnashing of teeth. Gnashing of teeth. I think that's the term. That is all over Facebook today and yesterday about how certain people are responsible for Victoria Sullivan's loss. Victoria Sullivan's campaign is responsible for the ultimate outcome of this election. And to try to blame it on who did and didn't endorse or who did and didn't do what is to avoid the actual realities of the election. And the Republican committee, some of its members are engaging in some of the same things. So there's been a lot of chatter on social media about sort of whether or not I'm happy and gloating over the outcome. The truth of the matter is I'm not. It was not a fun election to watch. It was a difficult election to watch. It brings me no joy to see the outcome as it is. I think that, the city's not in a good place. And Joyce Craig saying on election night that this isn't about her, it's about what we can accomplish when we work together. She maintains that at her own peril. For a while, she won. And, it wasn't a blowout like it was 2 years ago. And not for nothing, and people around me, my inner circle, if you want to call it that, will verify this. I always thought that Victoria was going to shave anywhere from 6 to 8 points off of her 14-point loss in this election. That's what I predicted she was going to do if she won the primary, and that prediction didn't change after she won the primary. And she shaved off roughly, she lost by, what did she lose by this time? 6 points? Where did that paper go? Yeah, she went from 56, she went from 13 to, that's 4, 6, to 6. So thank you. So she shaved roughly 7 points off, but a 6 point victory for Joyce Craig is nothing to sneeze at. However, if Joyce Craig has any desire to run for a fourth term for mayor, which I don't think she does, but if she does, she'll see in those numbers what, frankly, Ted Gatzis should have seen in 2015, which is probably not next time. So think about saying thank you and heading off into the sunset. But if she wants to earn another term, then the issues that drove what I believe, based on these numbers, drove independents to start to abandon her if they are not corrected and they continue in the direction that they're going, are going to cause a veritable sea change at the next election. Bob, you're on the air. Thanks for calling in.
Hello.
Go ahead, Bob. You're on the air.
Okay. The biggest loss in this whole election is you're not being a winner because your ideas and your plan was positive, and I think the city of Manchester is going to be really hurting for the next 2 years. And I hope that you come back again and run again.
Well, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. And I will tell you that that possibility is on the table.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the call. And that, you know, it's difficult to lose an election. I've lost two. Ironically, both of them for mayor. Every other election I've run, I've won. And but when you lose, I think it's important to sort of take stock of what happened. And certainly I've done my own post-mortem on my own campaign. And I know if I run again 2 years from now, exactly what will be different based on my assessment of where we did well and where we could have done better. And I think every candidate has got to do that before they start blaming others for what happened to them in their campaign. Because, frankly, for the complaints that are out there, had the roles been reversed, had I won the primary and Victoria lost, I'm pretty sure a lot of what she and her supporters posted about me on social media, which they are continuing to do, much of it false, would have found their way into the campaign against me. And that's sort of the nature of things. I also think that rather than running around and blaming everybody else for what happened to your campaign, it does everybody well to sort of take stock of what they did that maybe led to some of the things that they didn't want to happen or didn't think was helpful to their cause. At the end of the day, it's not enough to simply be a critic of your opponent. I think the union leader's editorial the Sunday before the election hit the nail right on the head. And that is, you got to show people not only what you're going to do, but how you're going to get it done. It can't all be about your opponent being awful. Yes, you are running against somebody for the office, but I think the more important part of it is you're also running for the office. And if you're not making the case for your own platform, if people aren't grasping or aren't buying into what you're putting on the table, then they're either not going to come out to vote for you, or they are going to come out and vote, but it won't be for you. And essentially, we saw a rerun of the 2019 campaign. Joyce Craig's message didn't change. Victoria Sullivan's message didn't change. What changed was the circumstance in the city. And to the degree that people were unhappy about that and willing just to vote for anybody but the person they thought was responsible for it, you saw a shift in the votes. You saw Joyce Craig lose 800 and some odd votes, but you saw Victoria Sullivan only pick up 575. She could have gotten all 81 of my write-ins, and it wouldn't have made any difference. And I'll tell you right now, if I hadn't suggested, and by the way, if I were looking to seriously disrupt the mayoral campaign, I wouldn't have waited until the Thursday before the election on this TV show to take 5 minutes out of the entire show to suggest that if you're unhappy, you send a message and write me in. I wouldn't have sent just one email the weekend before the election, and I wouldn't have waited, and I wouldn't have just put up one Facebook post. So the idea that I was actively campaigning to be written in as if I thought I was going to get hundreds or thousands of votes or a number that would materially affect the election is a fiction and a fantasy being perpetrated by people who were not addressing the campaign the way it needed to be addressed. And I'm not going to sit here and armchair quarterback the thing. I know what I would have done had I been the candidate. I know what my general election was going to be. I had a strategy because I actually learned this from Joyce Craig. It wasn't hard to see what they did in 2017 to beat Ted Gatsas. They figured out how to get non-traditional voters, meaning people who don't normally vote in city elections, into the city election. I had a strategy to do that as well. And I'm amazed for all of the conversations that I had with candidates up and down the ballot that I honestly didn't see any of it. And I think if we take a look at what happened in Virginia, and we take a look at what happened in New Jersey, and we take a look at what happened in school board races across the country, where people campaigned against critical race theory, where they campaigned against biological boys playing on girls' sports teams and using girls' locker rooms, where they campaigned against defund the police. These were issues that Joyce Craig was completely vulnerable on, because when defund the police rallies were being held here in Manchester, she said nothing, even after reporters asked her for comment. She led the charge on the transgender thing, and on both the city and school sides, there's been full-blown implementation of critical race theory in hiring practices, in trainings, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And these are things that all of their fingerprints were on. But for some reason, people didn't want to go there. And as a result, they failed to energize a Republican and independent voter base that is really worked up over this stuff. And I believe they're really worked up over it, because I heard about that at virtually every door I went to, that and the homeless vagrancy problem that was driving people absolutely bats here in the city. So, tough situation, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. And the only people responsible for the outcome are the ones who ran the campaigns. And the numbers, which we went through with you today, pretty much bear that out. We'll have more analysis once we know how many Democrats, Republicans, and independents turned out. And that, I'm pretty sure, is going to frost this cake. So at some point, as Mayor Gatsas famously pointed out in one campaign, when you point one finger, there's three pointing back at you. It's about time that everybody across the spectrum take a look at their own behaviors and their own actions and have their own sort of personal come to Jesus moment. So everyone can move forward successfully in future campaigns. I am your ever humble host, Richard Girard. Thanks for tuning in. Until next week, be good, be well. Don't do anything we wouldn't do. We're proud to have you in the audience. Thanks for being there. Good night.